Let's see if everybody can hear me. Is that good? Yes? Okay. Well, I'm going to suggest that if you can, you make sure that you have a good view of one of these two screens up front, because that way you can kind of follow along with the story as I'm telling it. Everybody who's had a scary, hard episode has a story. There are many stories out there, but today I'm here to tell you my story of how NPR, National Public Radio, authored Gayle Forman, a traffic jam, and Licking Memorial Hospital saved my life. Let me tell you about the day it began. It was September 6th, 2016, and I was driving to work from Westerville over here to Newark at the OSU campus. So I was driving east along Route 161. I actually don't have a little yellow bug, I just always wanted one, so this was my opportunity. Well, every day when I drive to work, I take the opportunity to listen to National Public Radio. They have great shows on. Here I'm doing a plug for them. And on this day, I was listening to the show Here and Now. There was an interview going on. Here and Now is hosted by Robin Young. And she was interviewing a very well-known author named Gayle Forman. Gayle Forman has written many, primarily young adult novels. They call them YA novels. Some of the more well-known ones are Just One Day, Just One Night, Just One Year, and the one that is probably most famous is the book If I Stay. Has anybody seen the movie If I Stay? It was very popular last year. It was based on her book. It was adapted into the movie by Warner Brothers. So it's still out there. If anybody's interested, you might be able to see it. And that's just a little photo from the movie. But on this particular day, Robin Young was interviewing Gayle Forman about her new book called Leave Me, about a young mother, an active young mother, who was so busy she didn't notice that she was having a heart attack. So I would like to play you a little excerpt of the actual interview I was listening to on the radio as I was driving. So listen carefully.
Gayle Forman is best known for her best-selling young adult book, If I Stay. It centers around Mia, a young woman whose entire family is killed in a car crash. But from If I Stay and YA, Gayle has now moved to an adult book titled Leave Me. Her heroine now, Mary Beth Klein, an overcommitted 44-year-old mother of twins, barely balancing family and a job with her husband Jason, who also depends on her. Mary Beth doesn't feel well, but she's got to get to her accountant's office with those late tax returns. Then she really doesn't feel well, but how can she go to the doctor? The school firmly tells her there is no aftercare, you have to get the kids. She finally gets to the hospital where the doctor's trying to tell her what? She needs surgery or something? But as she explains, she has too much to do.
In the coming days, someone had to get the kids to their ballet classes, their soccer clinics, their speech therapy sessions, their play dates, their birthday parties, to take them shopping for their Halloween costumes, to the pediatrician for their flu shots, to the dentist for their cleanings. Someone had to plan the meals, pay the bills, balance the checkbook. Someone had to get it all done, while still getting all the work done. Mary Beth sighed. It's just I have a house full of 4-year-olds and a very busy weekend. He stared at her for a long moment, frowning. Mary Beth looked back, disliking him already, and that was before he said, "You do realize you've had a heart attack."
Well, that is what I was listening to when I first started experiencing some very mild but kind of unusual symptoms noticeable. The first thing I felt as I was driving along 161 is a sort of a pinching across my upper chest. It really didn't feel painful at all, but it was noticeable. I felt like, oh, I'm having a little muscle spasm, didn't think anything of it. And I kept on driving. About another 5 minutes passed, and I started feeling pins and needles in my right arm. It felt like my arm was falling asleep. And I was leaning on the console on my right elbow, and I thought, oh, I must have pinched a nerve. And because it was my right arm, of course, I made no association of that with my heart. So I just kept on driving, and about another 5 minutes went by, and then I started feeling pins and needles in my left arm as well. And I thought, well, that is highly unusual. I wonder what could be going on. But we all have our arms fall asleep or our legs fall asleep. It really didn't alarm me. Now, as luck would have it, as I was approaching Newark, I ran into a huge traffic jam. Many of you probably remember when there used to be a traffic light at Cherry Valley Road, right? For many, many years. And some days the traffic would back up at that light and you'd be stuck, creeping, crawling along, even sometimes through a series of red, green, yellow lights. And that's what happened to me on that day. So there I am in my car approaching Cherry Valley Road, and there I am stuck in this huge traffic jam. There's nothing you can do. It's a multi-lane road, and you just creep along. Lucky for me, there was a traffic jam, because as I was sitting there creeping along, I started experiencing some new symptoms. In fact, I remember as I was sitting there looking up ahead, there was Wendy's on my left and Bob Evans on my right, and all of a sudden, I felt extremely nauseous and I broke out in a cold sweat. And of course, the immediate thought that came into my mind was, oh, I must have eaten something bad. Again, I did not associate it with my heart, because this is a typical symptom of food poisoning. I thought, well, that's what happened. So I'm still stuck in traffic. Another sequence of lights goes through another sequence. And as I am moving very slowly closer and closer to the intersection, Gayle Forman was describing the unusual symptoms of heart attacks in women. So I want to play another little clip of Gayle Forman. First it's introduced by Robin Young, and then Gayle Forman starts talking about heart attacks in women.
But on the other hand, women not paying attention when they're obviously having a heart attack. I mean, when the film is made, and I'm betting it will be, I can just hear a narrator voiceover reading your words. And in fact, Mary Beth did not even know that at that moment her heart tissue had begun to die from lack of oxygen. You know,
it's not obvious, though, with women. I think that's why heart attack is such a killer among women, because it doesn't necessarily feel like this. I think we all have this idea of this classic, like you have the pain in your left arm and you clutch it and then you pass out. And for a lot of women, it's just this sort of nausea that comes on, or it's this low-grade pain. And that combined with some of our tendency, my tendency, obviously, to rationalize it all away, it can be very dangerous.
Right. The last statement was, it can be very dangerous. I think those were the words that finally triggered the connection in my mind. And I realized, oh my gosh, was it possible? Could it actually be my heart? And that's why I was having these weird symptoms. I was having all of the symptoms at the same time. And here is this woman on the radio telling me that women have these really weird symptoms that are sometimes telling you you're having a heart attack. So what should I do? I figured, my plan was to go to work, and then I thought, well, I could just stop on the way home at the doctor's office and see what was going on. I knew that my students would be there waiting for class to start. I didn't want to cancel class. And on top of that, I think very typically, I realized I'd be incredibly embarrassed if I rushed to the emergency room and it turned out to be absolutely nothing? We all hesitate. Well, then I thought, on the other hand, what if it really was a heart attack? The consequences would be far worse than embarrassment. So I actually said out loud to myself that I had to make a decision. Was I going to go straight at the light at Cherry Valley Road and go and teach, or was I going to turn right and go to the ER? And then I thought about the warning that Gayle was saying. It was almost as if she was saying, Cindy, don't ignore the symptoms. And so it was at that particular moment, the light turned, and I decided to take the risk of embarrassment. And I called the campus. I asked them to please cancel my class. I was going to go to the emergency room. I wasn't feeling well. And then I called 911 and asked them for directions to Licking Memorial Hospital. I knew it was close, but I wasn't positive of the directions. Now, in normal circumstances, of course, I know it would have been far better to have called and asked for a squad to transport me to the hospital. Because after all, if you ask for a squad, they can actually hook you up to an EKG in the ambulance. They can call ahead to the hospital can be ready for you, they can know what's going on with your heart. It's a much better idea. However, in my case, I was still sitting there in the traffic jam, and I thought, well, if they send a squad, they'll probably get caught in the same traffic jam, they won't be able to find me, and it'll just end up taking longer. So I decided I had no choice. I had to get myself to the hospital. So I finally got to the light, and I turned right. Good decision. Pretty soon, I came to the hospital. My arrival was at the emergency room. I drove right up there. Only then I thought, well, what if someone comes in the next few minutes who really does have an emergency, and maybe I've just got food poisoning. I didn't want to block the ER entrance. So I thought, well, I'm not going to stop here. I'll just go to the parking lot, which I did. And I parked my car, and I got out, walked back to the emergency room, and walked up to the reception desk. I looked around, I saw there was a woman there, and I walked up, and pretty sheepishly, I said to her, I think I may be having a heart attack. And just as I got those words out, and I felt very silly saying them, I sort of collapsed. I couldn't stand up anymore. I collapsed onto the surface there, the desk they had there, and I told her I can't stand up. And she said, oh, would you like us to get you a wheelchair? I said, yes, please. And it was at that moment that the staff, the wonderful staff of Licking Memorial sprang into action. They got a wheelchair, they wheeled me immediately back into an exam room. They didn't take the time to write out get all of my information, they did it all verbally. They hooked me up to an IV and an EKG machine. Felt like dozens, there were probably 5 or 6 people there in the room getting all this done. And in very short order, they were able to make a diagnosis. I remember lying there and looking over at the nurse or the technician who was operating the EKG machine, and I saw her look up and nod emphatically to the nurse standing across on the other side of the room. I was, in fact, in the middle of having a heart attack. So, at that point, they got the cardiologist, and he raced to get there. And lucky for me, it was Dr. Raju, who was actually named Practitioner of the Year by Columbus CEO magazine. And lucky for me, Licking Memorial Hospital is one of the few that has this very wonderful interventional cardiology program. where they have a surgeon, they have a cardiologist, they have staff, nurses who are there at the ready to treat someone who walks in off the street, like I did, with no forewarning, and start doing what they do, which is the intervention. So Dr. Rajoub said that we needed to get up to the cath lab immediately. They wheeled me up, and they put a catheter up through my right wrist across my chest. Not a lot of fun, but they found that I had a 99.9% blockage of my right coronary artery. I want you to think about that for a moment. Remember I told you I had no pain? I still was having no pain. It was all of these other symptoms, and yet my right coronary artery was almost entirely blocked. So he inserted a balloon to open up the artery so the blood could start flowing, and then he had to put in 2 stents, kind of telescoped one inside the other to more permanently open up that area of the artery. Now, the desired time for all of that to happen, to get the balloon in and open up the artery, the protocol is to try to get that to happen in under 90 minutes because that minimizes the damage to the heart muscle. They were so good at what they did, and they were right there ready to do it, that in my case, it only took 61 minutes. Hooray. Because that meant I had minimal damage to my heart muscle. Well, after that intervention, of course, I had to recover. I was there in Licking Memorial for about 3 days, and the staff there was wonderful. I can't say enough about them. Not only did they save my life, but in addition to being so effective and efficient at their jobs, they were warm and caring and solicitous and supportive emotionally, and really got me what was a very difficult period. They helped me get through it, along, of course, with my family and friends, but they were truly wonderful. Now, of course, that's not the end of the story, because after you have a heart attack, you need to go through some period of rehab if you're smart. I had follow-up appointments with the cardiologist, and that's where I learned how important it is to attend a cardiac rehab program. Now, this is often challenging for women to do because, as you might know, women often find that they are not the typical cardiac rehab patient. You may go to a program and find you're surrounded with a number of elderly gentlemen who are doing the similar exercises, but it's so important to be conscientious about going because that's how you build up your heart muscle strength again. So I actually did that. I went for a couple of months of monitored exercise. They have you meet with a dietitian and you get other lifestyle advice, which is wonderful. And so all in all, I truly consider, now it's going backwards, I truly consider that I am one of the real lucky ones. Right now, I'm back at work and I'm trying to spread the word about women and heart attacks. In fact, I'd like to share with you a few very sobering statistics. You may be aware of some of these, but they were pretty shocking to me because I was unaware of these until after my own heart attack. So here are a few statistics. Fact number 1, heart disease is the #1 killer of women in the United States. Fact number 2, heart disease kills more women than all forms of cancer combined. Fact number 3, 42% of women who have heart attacks die within 1 year, compared to 24% of men. Fact number 4, one study found that the median delay time for women seeking help for a heart attack was 54 hours, That's more than 2 full days versus only 16 hours for men. And finally, fact number 5, 64% of women who die suddenly of coronary heart disease had no previous symptoms. That's pretty alarming. So, what is the challenge for all of us? How would you know when to go to the ER? What decision would you make? This is doing its own thing, independent of me. So I'm going to try to go back here to where it should be. Okay, here we go. What are the telltale signs of a heart attack? Is it always extreme chest pain? That's what most people think about. But in fact, you know from listening to my story that that's not always the case. Symptoms may vary greatly, as we know, between men and women. On this next slide, I've listed some of the symptoms that women are more likely to experience, like pressure or squeezing or pinching like I had in the center of the chest, nausea or vomiting or breaking out in a cold sweat. I had 2 of those. Shortness of breath, maybe pain, but it could be in the arms or the back or the neck or the jaw or the stomach, not necessarily the chest. Could be dizziness or lightheadedness or fainting, or it might just be extreme fatigue. In my case, personally, remember, I experienced a pinching across the upper chest without pain, tingling in my right and my left arm, nausea, and breaking out in a cold sweat. It was the fact that all of these things were happening simultaneously that clued me in that there was something wrong. But remember, there was no pain, and that was with a 99.9% blockage. So, what's the lesson that I hope to share with you today? Well, I like to remember 4 important lessons from this. Things to remember that is easy to think of as A, B, C, and D. A, be aware of what your body is telling you, what is normal for you and what is abnormal. Don't dismiss those signs. B, be brave. Don't be afraid of being embarrassed if you go and it turns out to be something other than a heart attack. C, take care of yourself as well as you would a family member or a close friend. And D, don't delay. Don't wait for a day or 2 days to pass or even several hours, because the delay is what costs you heart muscle. And most importantly of all, I want you to remember the warning that Gayle Forman sent to me over the radio. Don't ignore the symptoms. Those are the words that helped save my life. So my hope is that you'll remember those words and share them with your family and friends, and maybe together we can save another life. And who knows, the life you save just could be your own. Thank you so much for letting me share my story tonight.